Then we have a large category of phobias which are called zoophobias, the fear of various animals. Again, besides whatever biographical components there might be, there's always a connection to the perinatal level. For example, we talked about the fact that the beginning of birth typically feels like being engulfed, being swallowed. And a lot of these phobias of large animals are associated with the fear of being swallowed. The fear of the animal is linked to the fear of being swallowed. There are other phobias where we need to know the specific symbolism which is associated with the perinatal matrices. So, for example, many people in the second matrix would have experienced, kind of archetypal experience of a tarantula, of a giant spider that takes the freedom of the fly or the butterfly. The butterfly in ordinary life has basically the freedom to go anywhere. It lives in a kind of unobstructed universe. And when the spider web comes and the spider, it takes the freedom away. It wraps the insect and life is threatened. It's a situation that's very similar to the fetus going into the birth process. And people who have arachnophobia, who have fear of spiders, they are very close to the memory of the beginning of birth. And when they see what the spider is doing to the fly, it sort of activates their own fear and then gets linked to the spiders as such. You might have seen the Steven Spielberg movie, Arachnophobia. Many of the blockbuster movies really draw on the perinatal symbolism. You can think about Jaws, for example, where it's a different kind of interruption of the oceanic situation. It's again something that the fetus goes through, going from the kind of aquatic freedom to a situation of being engulfed, of being devoured. The Shawshank Redemption, the escape from a prison through the sewage system, is a very powerful perinatal symbolism, and so on. Snakes are very powerful perinatal symbols, particularly the boa constrictor snakes that swallow the prey so that they look pregnant, but they also have the habit of twisting their body around the prey and crushing. So some of the phobias of snakes have that kind of a deep unconscious connection. The viper type of a snake usually stands for the fear of imminent death. So we see that we have a different level of understanding of the symbol of the snake, which in traditional psychoanalysis always is interpreted as being related to the penis. We have then also many different ways of understanding the symbolism of the snake on the transpersonal level, where we have to identify the archetypal domain from which that symbol comes. For example, the snake symbolizing the Kundalini is a very different kind of a snake than the snake from the Garden of Eden. And that's very different from the plumed serpent of the Aztecs or the rainbow serpent of the Australian Aborigines. So on the transpersonal level, the snakes have very different meaning depending on the archetypal context. Some people suffer the phobia of lightning and thunder, which is called caraunophobia technically. This is something, by the way, that Beethoven had very strongly, and he had this beautiful musical representation of the storm in his pastoral symphony. I worked with several people who had this problem, and psychodynamically this was linked to the very last part of the third matrix, when we suddenly get the connection to the light. The transition from the third matrix to the fourth matrix is not just the completion of the birth process and seeing the light that the child originally saw when he or she was being born, but the reliving of birth has kind of a psycho-spiritual dimension in that the light that we are perceiving has a kind of a numinous quality. It's a spiritual experience, a reconnection with the divine domain. So in this sense, the lightning is a very appropriate symbol for that. For many people, the final stages of the third matrix are associated with fire, the experience of fire, when all these pent-up energies are now being kind of precipitously released. This creates feelings of heat, and this can be accompanied with actually visual experience of fire, being burned or passing through fire. And the fire is experienced as kind of a purging fire. Now, people who are in connection with that aspect of the birth process, the one that's most immediately available to them from the unconscious, they have issues in relation to fire, depending on where they are in relation to this experience. Whether they are afraid of it, they would develop then pyrophobia, but they might also be attracted to it because they're then close to the completion of the experience, and they might become pyromaniac when they actually want to experience powerful fire and expect from it the kind of liberation and opening that they would get from the inner experience of the fire if this were a kind of inner transformation process. We'll maybe mention just one more of the phobias, which is very common, and that's the fear of traveling, either in a train or in a car or in an airplane. Again, whatever the other dimensions are, people usually find the perinatal dimension, where the basic idea is that you get into a very powerful mechanical system where you get close and then you are carried, and the movement is sort of beyond your control. Typically, people who have this fear, for example, in a car, they have that fear only if they are being driven. They don't have the fear if they are in control, if they actually can hold the wheel. So it's a fear of being kind of overpowered and carried in a system that doesn't give us the opportunity to control it. We come to the next problem, which is depression. Depression can appear either in isolation, or in some people it appears in a way where it alternates with periods of mania. Now, depression is characterized by kind of low mood, lack of initiative, inability to enjoy things. It comes in two forms. One we can call inhibited depression, where there's also very little movement. The person is just kind of sitting there with no interest in the environment, self-absorbed. And the other form of depression is called agitated depression, where again there is very low mood, there's despair, there could be anxiety, but there is a lot of movement. The person, again, might hit the floor, might be kind of rolling around, hitting the head against the wall, tearing the hair, tearing the clothes, and so on. Mania, in a sense, is an opposite of the inhibited depression. Usually it's a state where there is euphoria that's kind of unnatural, almost forceful. There is a tendency to move around, to do a lot of things, go shopping, engage people in interaction, seek some kind of promiscuous sexual adventures, make fun of people, tell obscene jokes, and so on. There's a flight of thoughts, it's called fugue, very rapid thinking, very rapid talking, rapid moving around. Now we have this sort of classical Freudian interpretation that this is a problem which is related to the active oral period. Now this doesn't explain many, many different important aspects of depression. It doesn't tell us why the depression it comes in these two forms, the inhibited depression, the agitated depression. It doesn't tell us why patients who are depressed feel that they are stuck, that they are in a kind of situation from which there is no way out. It's kind of a no exit, hopeless situation. It doesn't explain why patients who are depressed are physiologically blocked and also bioenergetically blocked. But there is a very, very concrete physical expression. These people feel actually oppressed and they feel pain and tension. When we do biochemical examinations, even in somebody who's in an inhibited depression, we find out that they're in a high state of stress, according to the biochemical indications. The depression has been described as sitting on the outside, running on the inside, so you don't see anything from the outside, but there is a kind of inner storm happening. None of that can really be explained from a situation, where there's an overly frustrated, sort of lonely, abandoned infant and so on, which would be the kinds of situations that depression would be explained from.